Picture this. You're standing in your kitchen and you catch your reflection in the microwave door. You're eating the same way you've eaten for the last 10 years, maybe even better. Fewer carbs, more vegetables, same portion sizes you've always used. And yet, there's a layer of fat sitting stubbornly around your midsection that simply was not there 5 years ago. It doesn't respond to the treadmill the way it used to. It doesn't respond to the diet the way it used to. Here's the twist almost nobody explains to you. That fat isn't just fat sitting there doing nothing. It's a visible sign that somewhere deep inside your cells, a hormone you've relied on your entire adult life has stopped getting the response it used to get. Your cells have started, quite literally, ignoring insulin. And the reason it's happening now, in your 40s or 50s, has almost nothing to do with willpower and almost everything to do with a hormone shift most doctors mention in passing but rarely explain in full. This is bigger than eat less, move more. This is about a chemical partnership inside your body that's been running smoothly for decades and is now quietly falling apart. If you've noticed your energy, your waistline, or your cravings changing in ways that don't match your effort, you are not imagining it, and you are not broken. You're watching a real, measurable, biological event unfold. Welcome to the Body Memo. Here's what you've probably been told. Insulin resistance is a diet problem. Eat too much sugar, skip the gym for a few years, and eventually your body gets used to insulin and stops responding properly. That explanation isn't wrong exactly, it's just incomplete. It's the story that applies when hormones are steady, and for most of your adult life, they were. You might also assume that menopause weight gain is simply your metabolism slowing down with age, full stop. An unavoidable, unexplained decline you're supposed to accept. But metabolic slowdown appears to be only part of the picture, and treating it as the whole story hides the actual mechanism at work. The real story has three main characters. The first is insulin, the hormone your pancreas releases every time you eat, whose entire job is to usher glucose out of your bloodstream and into your cells for energy or storage. The second is estrogen, specifically the form called estradiol, which for decades has been quietly acting as a silent partner to insulin, helping your muscle and liver cells stay sensitive and responsive to it. The third is visceral fat, the fat that doesn't sit under your skin where you can pinch it, but wraps around your internal organs deep in your abdominal cavity. For most of your reproductive life, these three characters existed in a kind of biological truce. Estrogen supported insulin's work. Visceral fat stayed relatively low. Your cells answered the door quickly when insulin knocked. Then, as you move through perimenopause and into menopause, estrogen production from your ovaries drops. Not gradually and gently, but often in an uneven, sometimes sharp decline. And when the silent partner leaves the room, the whole system starts to wobble. Research following women through the menopausal transition, including large, long-term studies tracking metabolic health across this life stage, has repeatedly found that insulin sensitivity tends to decline and abdominal fat tends to rise during this window, independent of age alone. To understand why this happens, you need to go down to the level of a single muscle cell, because that's where most of the actual drama takes place. Think of your muscle cells as a massive chain of loading docks running along a highway, your bloodstream. Every time you eat a meal, especially one with carbohydrates, your blood glucose rises and your pancreas releases insulin, which travels down that highway like a dispatcher's signal, telling every loading dock to open its doors. On the surface of each muscle cell sit specialized doors called glucose transporters. When insulin arrives and binds to its receptor, it triggers those doors to move to the surface and swing open, allowing glucose to flow out of your blood and into the cell, where it can be burned for energy or stored for later. For most of your life, This system runs like a well-oiled operation. Insulin knocks, the doors open promptly, glucose flows in, and your blood sugar drops back down to a normal, steady baseline within a couple of hours. This is what a healthy, insulin-sensitive body looks like in action. Dozens of times a day, every single day, largely without you noticing anything at all. But here's what's easy to miss. This entire loading dock system was never operating in isolation. Estrogen receptors sit on your muscle cells, your liver cells, even the beta cells in your pancreas that produce insulin in the first place. For decades, circulating estrogen has been binding to those receptors and, in effect, helping maintain the loading dock machinery, supporting the internal signaling proteins that relay insulin's message from the cell surface to the cell's interior. Estrogen also appears to help protect your mitochondria, the energy-producing structures inside each cell, keeping them efficient at converting glucose into usable fuel rather than shuttling it off into fat storage. That's the environment your body has been running for the last 30+ years. Now let's watch what happens when the maintenance crew starts leaving. As you move through perimenopause, your ovarian estrogen production becomes erratic, then drops to a fraction of what it once was after menopause. And because estrogen receptors are wired directly into your muscle and liver insulin signaling machinery, the effects appear to ripple outward almost immediately. Imagine that same loading dock, but now the facilities manager who used to keep every hinge oiled has retired. The doors still technically work, but they're stiffer. It takes a stronger knock, more insulin to get them to open at all. Your pancreas, sensing that blood sugar isn't dropping as quickly as it should after meals, compensates by producing more insulin than before. For a while, this brute force approach works. Your blood sugar numbers on a standard test might even look normal, masking the fact that your insulin levels behind the scenes are climbing higher and higher just to achieve the same result. This state, sometimes called compensatory hyperinsulinemia, can persist for years before blood sugar itself starts creeping upward on lab work. At the same time, a second character enters the story: fat redistribution. Before menopause, when your body stored extra energy as fat, estrogen appeared to direct much of that storage towards subcutaneous depots, the hips, thighs, and backside. That fat, while not necessarily desirable to look at, is metabolically relatively quiet. But as estrogen declines, that direction changes. Fat storage tends to shift toward the visceral space, deep around your liver, pancreas, and intestines. Think of visceral fat as a new tenant moving into the same downtown district as your loading docks, except this tenant is loud, disruptive, and constantly filing noise complaints. Visceral fat tissue isn't inert. It actively secretes inflammatory signaling molecules. These molecules travel through your bloodstream and appear to interfere directly with the insulin signaling pathway inside nearby cells, essentially adding static to the line between insulin and the loading dock doors. The more visceral fat accumulates, the noisier the interference tends to get, and the harder your cells have to work to hear insulin's message at all. Layer onto this a third factor: sleep. Hot flashes and night sweats, common during this transition, fragment deep sleep. Poor sleep is associated with reduced insulin sensitivity and elevated cortisol, your primary stress hormone. Cortisol, in turn, can raise blood glucose and may encourage further visceral fat storage, feeding the exact same cycle you're trying to interrupt. What you end up with is three reinforcing pressures: reduced cellular sensitivity, an increasingly hostile visceral fat environment, and disrupted sleep, all converging during the same handful of years. In the hours after a single meal, this may show up as a sharper, higher blood sugar spike than you would have experienced at 35, followed by a steeper crash, which may help explain the sudden 3 in the afternoon energy dip or the intense craving for something sweet that seems to appear out of nowhere. Over the course of weeks and months, chronically elevated insulin encourages your body to keep storing fat rather than releasing it for fuel, which may help explain why the scale and the tape measure move in a direction that feels disconnected from your actual habits. Muscle mass, meanwhile, tends to decline with age in a process called sarcopenia. And because muscle is your body's single largest site for glucose disposal, losing it further reduces your capacity to clear sugar from your blood, compounding the problem from a completely separate angle. Stretch this out over years, and the consequences extend well beyond your waistline. Persistently elevated insulin and blood sugar are associated with increased risk for prediabetes and, over time, type 2 diabetes. They're also linked to greater cardiovascular strain, since chronically high insulin may affect blood vessel function and blood pressure regulation. Some research even points to a connection between insulin resistance and the brain fog many women report during this transition, since your brain is highly sensitive to how efficiently glucose is delivered and used. None of these systems exist in isolation. Your metabolism, your sleep, your heart, and your brain are all reading from the same set of hormonal signals, which is part of why this hormonal shift can feel like it's touching every part of your life at once. None of this is a life sentence, and it's not evidence that your body is failing you. It's evidence that the rules changed, and the old playbook needs an update. Because muscle tissue is your body's primary glucose-clearing real estate, building and preserving it may help support insulin sensitivity during this transition. Resistance training a few times a week is one of the more consistently supported strategies for this. Prioritizing protein at meals may help protect that muscle tissue as you age. A short walk after meals has been associated in some studies with a lower post-meal blood sugar spike, essentially giving that surplus glucose somewhere productive to go. Addressing sleep disruption, including talking to your doctor about options for managing hot flashes and night sweats, may also help take some pressure off the cortisol side of this equation. It's also worth having a direct conversation with your doctor about where your fasting glucose, insulin, and long-term blood sugar markers stand right now, before symptoms become impossible to ignore, and about whether hormone therapy could be an appropriate conversation for your individual situation. This isn't about chasing a cure or reversing menopause. It's about understanding the mechanism well enough to work with your body instead of feeling betrayed by it. Your body isn't malfunctioning. It's running an old hormonal partnership through a brand new chapter, and it's asking for a different kind of support than it used to need. So tell me, have you noticed your blood sugar, cravings, or belly fat shift during perimenopause or menopause, even when nothing else about your diet changed? What was the very first sign you noticed? Let me know in the comments below. If you found this helpful, subscribe for weekly body science memos.